I still remember the night she asked me that question. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No tears. Just her standing in the doorway of our bedroom, arms crossed, voice calm but confused. "Why did you change?" she asked. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman I had married was standing right in front of me. Yet somehow, she felt like a stranger. The same face, the same voice, but not the same soul. I didn't answer immediately. I was tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes, but the kind that settles in your chest after years of swallowing words you were never allowed to say. "I didn't change," I finally said. "I adapted." She frowned, like that answer offended her. Maybe it did. People don't like being reminded that their actions force others to become someone they never wanted to be. Back then, I used to come home early. I used to tell her everything, my worries, my plans, my fears. I trusted her with the softest parts of me. I believed marriage meant loyalty, respect, and protection of what belongs to us. I was proud to call her my wife. I defended her in rooms she never entered. I chose her even when choosing her cost me friendships, opportunities, and pieces of myself. But slowly, things shifted. She started guarding her phone the way I used to guard my heart. Passwords changed. Smiles appeared that had nothing to do with me. Conversations became shorter, colder. When I asked questions, I was called insecure. When I stayed silent, I was called distant. The night she asked why I changed, she didn't know this, but that was the same night I finally understood something painful. Love doesn't disappear all at once. It leaks, quietly, through lies you ignore, through boundaries that get crossed by mistake, through loyalty that gets traded for attention. She waited for an answer, her eyes searching my face. And that's when I said it. Calm, clear, honest. "You changed too," I told her. "The day you gave away what was mine." Her face went pale, because deep down, she knew exactly what I meant. And in that moment, I realized this story wasn't about a man who changed. It was about a man who woke up. The room went quiet after I said it. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. This one was heavy, suffocating, like the air right before a storm breaks. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. For the first time in a long while, she didn't have a quick answer ready. "What are you talking about?" she finally asked, though her voice lacked conviction. That I leaned back against the bed, rubbing my hands together slowly. My heart was steady, which surprised even me. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, always filled with anger. But now that it was here, all I felt was clarity. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "The late nights, the deleted messages, the way you stopped looking at me the way you used to." She shook her head, stepping further into the room like she was trying to reclaim ground she had already lost. "I never touched anyone," she said quickly. "You're imagining things." I let out a quiet laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. That line had been used so many times it felt rehearsed. "Giving yourself away doesn't always mean physical," I replied. "Sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes it's choosing someone else's validation over your husband's trust." Her eyes dropped to the floor. That small movement told me more than any confession ever could. I remember the nights I sat beside her while she scrolled endlessly, smiling at her screen while I stared at the ceiling, wondering when I became invisible. I remembered how she stopped asking about my day, how my achievements became nice instead of "I'm proud of you." I didn't confront her then. Not because I didn't notice, but because I hoped she would stop on her own. I believed love meant patience. I believed silence could save you that it didn't. I had to become colder to survive, I continued. I had to pull back because every time I reached for you, I felt like I was begging for something that used to be mine. She looked up at me then, eyes glossy, lips trembling. "I didn't think it hurt you like this," she whispered. "That's the problem," I said softly. "You didn't think about me at all." And for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not fear of losing the marriage, but fear of losing control over the version of me who used to tolerate everything in silence. I could see it then, the moment she realized the consequences of her actions. She had built walls so high around herself that I had forgotten the man I once was could no longer climb them. Every word she had dismissed, every glance she had ignored, every secret smile she had shared with someone else, they had all added up, silently reshaping me. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she said, her voice barely audible, like she was afraid it might shatter if it got any louder. I shook my head slowly, letting the truth settle between us. It's never about meaning, I said. It's about what you did. You took pieces of me I trusted you with. And once they were gone, nothing was the same. She sank onto the edge of the bed, finally vulnerable, and I realized I was seeing her in a way I never had before. Not the woman I married, but the woman who had changed me without a single word of explanation. That I wanted to reach for her, to touch her hand, to remind her of the man she fell in love with. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who had learned to protect himself, someone who had learned that love could not survive where respect and loyalty were absent. Do you even see me anymore? I asked quietly, though I already knew the answer. Her eyes met mine, glossy and guilty. I, I thought I did, she admitted. That's the problem, I said. You thought. You didn't know. And you didn't care enough to find out. Silence returned, heavier this time, filled with all the words we had failed to say over the years. And as I watched her struggle with the truth, I realized that change was inevitable. But the wake it leaves behind is something you can never ignore. That I wasn't angry anymore. I was just awake. That I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights flickering in the distance. They felt so far away, yet somehow they mirrored the distance that had grown between us. The man who once laughed with her, who once shared every dream and fear, had slowly retreated into himself, leaving only a shadow of what we used to be. She stayed on the bed, silent, as if afraid to move, afraid that her next action might break what little remained. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. She knew the weight of her choices without me saying another word. I tried, I said after a long pause. I try to be patient. I try to wait for you to come back to me. But patience isn't enough when someone keeps taking and never giving. Her hands fidgeted nervously in her lap. I didn't realize, she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. You didn't realize, I echoed, my voice steady but hollow. That's exactly it. You never realized what it meant to hurt me because you never truly saw me. You saw what you wanted to see. A part of me still loved her, the part that remembers the laughter, the warmth, the late-night conversations where we dreamed about the future. But that part had learned to stay quiet, to hide, because it had been ignored for too long. I can't go back, I finally said, turning to face her. My eyes were calm, but firm. We can't pretend nothing happened. You gave away pieces of me I can never get back. And now, I have to live with that truth. She looked at me, broken and regretful, as if she finally understood that some losses are irreversible. And in that moment, I realized that love wasn't just about holding on. It was also about knowing when letting go becomes the only way to survive. That I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I simply stood there, letting her see the man I had become, someone she could no longer reach. I walked toward the door, my hand hovering over the handle for a moment, as if I could pause time and undo everything. But I knew I couldn't. Years of small betrayals, of ignored feelings and broken trust, had built a wall that neither of us could climb. She stood up slowly, as if finally realizing that the person she loved was no longer the same. Please, can we fix this? She asked, her voice trembling. That I shook my head, gently but firmly. Some things can't be fixed. Not when the damage is done, and not when the choices were made without care for what was lost. Tears streamed down her face, and I felt a pang in my chest. Not for what I had lost, but for the love that had once been pure before it was fractured by careless hands. I wanted to tell her that I forgave her, that I understood why she changed, that maybe we could try again, but the truth was harsher than any words of comfort. I loved you, I said softly, my voice breaking for the first time that night. I still care, but love alone isn't enough. You gave away what was mine, and now I have to reclaim myself. She sank to the floor, sobbing silently, and I finally turned away, stepping out into the cool night air. The streets were empty, but I felt lighter somehow, as if a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted. For the first time in years, I felt like me again. I didn't know what the future held, or if I would ever trust the same way again. But I knew this. I wouldn't let anyone take pieces of me without permission ever again. And as I walked into the night, I carried a quiet strength, born not from anger, but from the clarity of finally seeing the truth. Some doors close not to punish, but to protect. And this was my door, my choice, my life to reclaim.